Hi everyone, welcome. Well, I usually don't use this gadget to bring down information about my worm bins, but I figured I'd give it a try. I did actually find one other document on here, similarly scribbled together, about the same exact batch of worms, but on that write-up, I think it said something about 19 feedings and the age was much higher, so perhaps I had already once before used this to share info about the original red wiggler worms, because in that case too it was with the original red wiggler worms, but whatever, it's not so interesting in terms of the gadget that I'm sharing the information with. It's more about the system itself. So the system of original red wiggler worms, has been fed a dozen times already, and for feeding number 13 I've got this nice assortment of different kitchen scraps, a variety of fruits and veggies, and I believe there's even a little chunk of old bread in there. Only one chunk as far as I remember, so maybe only one of the two systems is going to get this. That last check-in, 14 days ago, 2 weeks ago, included a type of food that I usually don't give my worm bins, which was yams. So I am definitely curious to see how that last feeding is coming along after 2 weeks. And it wasn't yams, it was one yam, which I cut down the middle, but I mean, if you're familiar with what a yam is, it's like a very large potato, a very potato-ish type vegetable, root vegetable, I assume. I don't really eat yams, but I got it from my mom, and I cut the yam in half, so each system was fed a half of a yam, and wow, seems like our feeding zone indicators are getting demolished here. I didn't come down here with any fresh new coffee filters, but I do have a collection of them right here on the side. So let me just grab a couple, right? Perhaps we'll just swap out these old ones with a couple replacements. And the old ones can just get used as supplementary bedding down in the feeding zones. So let's check out how the yams did. I'm getting this vibe as if bin number 1 is somehow more full than bin number 2. I even got that sense before I removed the plastic cover. So I'm wondering if perhaps we could try to level the playing field here by maybe being a little bit more generous with bedding in bin number 2 to help it catch up. If I don't forget, I'll do something along those lines when we replenish the food supply down here. So, well, I've excavated a ways down already, but still not encountered anything that would resemble half of a yam, because I mean, we're talking about an object larger than my fist, and I believe that I've just encountered it. And wow, that is something else. I did get feedback from numerous viewers, because I put the question out there to others who might have already given their worm bins yam, and I guess the prediction was correct, that the yam was definitely a popular item. They've gone right into the skin of the thing and pretty much stripped it clean of any vegetable matter down inside of it. And I'm guessing that the only reason they've not yet polished off the outer skin of the thing is because it's probably a tougher substance, but that is so cool. I can still see a little bit of fibrous material at the very bottom, but there weren't really any worms inside the thing anymore, so perhaps from the point of view of the worms, they've polished off everything that they could easily. And just like any other organic matter that has the potential to break down, that'll just continue breaking down at its own pace. Here's another hollow object, which does actually have worms down inside of it. This is half of a husk of a mango seed. And my fingers keep bumping into other hard objects. There were pumpkin stems down in these bins. So here's one. Pumpkin stems, as you can imagine, are going to take quite some time. In fact, there was one very, very huge pumpkin stem that I fed to my worms once, and it just kept persisting and persisting and persisting. perhaps because I didn't monkey around with it and help it with the breakdown process by chipping it to pieces. I just always made an effort to not do any of that, to be able to observe the natural breakdown process. But when I showed it during the last feeding of the system that it's in, the Vermibag Mini, that pumpkin stem, that was a few days ago now, was already 771 days in progress. So a really large pumpkin stem can take years to break down, as you can tell based on those types of numbers. So let's not bury all of this material, because I'm going to return that back down into the feeding zone. But let's progress over to bin number 2, where we're probably going to find very similar stuff, but here perhaps we'll try to pick up the pace a bit, since there's not going to be quite as many surprises, because I always strive to maintain a certain degree of consistency in my systems that are sort of paired up like these. And well, over here we're definitely seeing more of a worm party. And okay, in the case of this half of a yam, the worms are definitely still working it, and I would say about 2/3 of the insides of this yam's skin have been cleared out, but they've still got a ways to go. So that's interesting to see. Well, we've already bumped into a pumpkin stem and leftover yam, and here seems like the feeding zone's a little bit more busy than it was over in bin number 1. I guess, well, if they've already polished off the majority of what they got last time in bin number 1, it's not too surprising that they're probably just cruising the rest of the system looking for other feeding opportunities. And what do we have here? I guess, yeah, here I believe we had 2 pumpkin stems. And this one is a little bit more stubby and thick, but presumably a very similar substance to the other one we saw earlier. And these pumpkin stems are by no means as large as the one that I've been tracking the age of. And in fact, I wasn't really all that interested in actually knowing the specific age. Oh, here it is. I knew that there was still one more unaccounted for piece of material, the husk of the mango seed that bin number 2 received. But yeah, since this pumpkin stem was so massive, I started putting a counter in my tracking spreadsheet to be able to report on its age once in a while. So let's get to feeding these little guys. Like I said, I'm going to try to account for the difference in bedding that I observed by putting a little bit into bin number 1, but not as much as we're going to put into bin number 2, because bin number 2 is the system where we're going to see if we can help the system get caught up in terms of how much material it's got in it. So I put in about twice as much bedding over here into the feeding zone of bin number 2. And let's not forget about the leftovers. The yummy yam, the reused, repurposed feeding zone indicators, and whatever else we are bumping into here. So let's do the same over here. And then we can come in with their delicious assortment of stuff. Here's that chunk of bread. I wonder if I can share it. We'll give each system a piece of that, and then as far as this big frozen together block of material, I'll just see if I can fairly distribute it. I see some banana peel over here, and I left a little bit behind for this system too to get some. And then there's a good bit of cucumber peel here too, which I'm going to try to divvy out evenly. And I'm guessing a lot of this might have come from my mom, because when it comes to banana peels, I usually just leave those out in my freezer. I don't throw them into a bag, an assortment of stuff like what we're seeing here. So when I find the banana peels mixed into these assortments of fruits and veggies, I usually assume that that was my mom's contribution to the worm feast. And I've got coffee we're going to add to the feeding as well, but before we do, I'm sprinkling in a little bit of grit, a little bit of pulverized eggshell to accompany their feeding, and then in can go the coffee. So now, sometimes I try to mix things up a little bit. My typical routine is to reach out to the outer edges of the systems to bring in material with which we can cover up the feeding zone, but sometimes I also just want to step away from the routine and not be so much of a creature of habit as I know that I am. So I think in this case we're going to deliberately not touch the outer edges just for the sake of mixing it up, but I think we've got sufficient stuff that we excavated from the center with which we can cover up and level things off here. Yeah, sure seems that way. And then I guess the impression I got when we first got in here was that we probably didn't leave a top coating of leafy matter. So I'm going to come in here with my dry leaves because I just replenished my supply. I bought in a nice fresh load of this stuff, so my box is almost full, with the exception of the little bit that I applied to one of my other systems. So let's follow along with the whole idea of being sparing with the bedding type materials in bin number 1, since it seems like we got quite a bit of material in bin number 1, and see if we could go a little bit more generous in bin number 2, just for the sake of trying to help level the playing field as far as the amount of material in these two systems. And now, between the application of a generous amount of bedding down in the feeding zone and now a fairly generous amount of top covering leafy matter in bin number 2, I think we're on the road to getting the amount of material in these two systems to be a little bit more evenly matched than it is right now. And you know what? These dry leaves are going to work nicely to help me get some of this material adhering to my glove off and back down into service, where it does a much better job than being flushed down the sink when I go clean off my gloves. So that's it for the check-in, everyone. With the now, see, I can't just look over at that gadget to see what the age of the system is because it's turned off, gone into sleep saver mode. I was going to mention the age of the bin as we wind down things here, but it doesn't occur to me offhand, but it doesn't matter. That's it for the check-in with the original Red Wigglers, and I believe it was Lucky Feeding 13 going in today. The age, whatever, it was in the beginning of the video. So that's it for the check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.